following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
What's up, Downers? Welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web. You know what it is. It's, of course, The System is Down, the place where we talk about the things that trigger you, the things that make you uncomfortable, the things that most people get offended by. This is the place where you come if you're offended by people who get offended by things. We're here to have open, civil discussions. No name-calling, no shouting, none of the typical garbage that goes on in your normal day-to-day life on Facebook and on the social medias. This is a place where we talk about things like conspiracies, politics, and religion, all the things that your family prays don't bring up around the Thanksgiving dinner table. And if you're new here, of course, go find the person who invited you, give them a big #MeToo slap on the rear and a kiss on the mouth from you and from me, because you're going to enjoy being here, and I'm going to enjoy having you here, and I know that you're going to enjoy it because we're doing another episode of TriPartisan Triggering. That's right, we're doing it. We're doing it. If you're not familiar, Tripartisan Triggering is where I have on 3 guests, a Democrat, a Republican, and a Libertarian, to discuss things that are going on in the world, some touchy topics, and just civilly discuss and get different points of view from people with different political leanings. And a lot of people have complimented those episodes, saying, I can't believe that 3 people who disagree on politics could have a civil conversation without yelling at each other. Yep, that's what the show's all about. That's what we're here to do. So it's kind of a great, exemplifying demonstration of the possibilities of humanity, which is the point of this show, changing the world one uncomfortable conversation at a time. And if you want to hear the other episodes that we've done with these 3 gentlemen, you can go check them out. I think we've done 3, 4, maybe 5, I don't remember. Several episodes of Tripartisan Triggering so far over the years. Go to tsidpod.com and just type in Tripartisan Triggering, and they should pop up there. But yeah, it's of course Marc, Claire, Ryan Beckenbaugh, and Jon Schweppe. So we're going to jump into that real quick here. This one is the defense of libertarianism. Me and Marc are both libertarians, and the other 2 guys are obviously not. And it's just a debate about the practical applications of libertarianism. So it should be a good one, because I know we have a lot of great libertarian listeners listening to this show. So we're going to get into that here in just a moment. And it's longer than most episodes, because I still feel like we barely touched the subject. We'll probably still have to do another episode on libertarianism, because there's so much to go over, so many things to process and debate and work our way through. But this one is a 2-part. No, it was going to be a 2-parter. That's why it's a really long one. It's not a 2-parter like I initially intended, because I've kind of been stockpiling interviews lately, and I've got a bunch of great conversations that I want to get to you as soon as possible. So I figured, hey, if you want it to be a 2-parter, if you can't digest a full, 2-hour plus episode of a show, then just listen to it in 2 parts. Pause it in the middle and come back to it. That's how life works. You are responsible for how you consume this show. So it's a long one, and we'll get into it as quickly as possible. I won't ramble for too long here, but I, of course, have to remind you guys about the Downers Club, which is our Patreon program that keeps the show getting bigger and better, more beautiful every single week. And you also get bonus episodes of the show every single week. Go over to patreon.com/The System is Down. You can get perks, all sorts of perks. You can get merch and stuff. I don't know. Go check it out. You know how Patreon works. If you don't know by now, that's on you. But you can sign up for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/The System is Down. Also, a quick tidbit here. I am making a documentary, if you haven't heard. It's called The Moon, the Myth, the Legend. It's all about having civil conversations about the moon hoax theories, the moon landing, and all the stuff around that. So I'm not going to, like I said, ramble too much here at the beginning. I'll talk a little bit more after if you make it that far. But go check out the documentary and consider supporting it. Consider pre-ordering your copy of it at moonmythlegend.com. All right. Let's get into this. This is my conversation with Ryan Beckenbaugh, Jon Schweppe, and Marc Claire, the Tripartisan Triggering Trio, talking about libertarianism. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get weird. We are back with the TriPartisan Triggering folks. Marc Claire, John Schweppe, who's already interrupting as hashtag MAGA country does, and Ryan Beckenbaugh. We tried to set this up over the last couple months, and for some reason, something came up every single time we tried to. Ryan and Mark, and I think John even had all the excuses. I was the only person that was there every single time. I was sitting alone in this room by myself, just waiting for people to log on, and they were all like, nah, not going to do it. But we are here finally, ready to go, ready to talk about another. Well, if you're not familiar with how this works, Ryan is supposedly a Democrat, John supposedly a Republican, Mark supposedly a Libertarian, and we talk about things civilly together to show that it can happen. It's an actual thing. It shouldn't be that much of a, stretch to bring three people with differing opinions together, but for some reason people find it appalling and surprising that we're not shouting and calling names. So, how's everybody doing? John, go. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Good. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Ryan, how are you? This is how this is going to go this time. Ryan hates everything.
I hate myself. I hate my life.
Hate my party, right?
Dan it did say before the show, Dan said we have to keep all answers to 3.2 seconds or less after the bonus content went too long.
Yes.
So I'm going to defend libertarianism in 3 seconds.
It's going to be a debate where there's a bell that dings after 3.2 seconds. So, Mark, tell me how your show's been going.
My opponent here.
All right. No, we typically in these episodes I don't disclose what the topic is beforehand, but somebody in our group message suggested that we just talk about libertarianism and throw that out there because as people who have listened to this in the past know, Mark is a libertarian and I am also a libertarian as the host. So
that's how debates are supposed to work.
That's how debates are supposed to work. I am
supposed to be hosted by someone who firmly takes one of the stances.
Would you prefer that I was a Green Party member coming in here to make sure you guys were all kept in line?
That'd be interesting. I wouldn't prefer it, but it would be interesting.
Give me 1 sec while I prepare for this.
You could probably book
arguments against libertarianism.
What are you? Are you a robot? Why do you have to ask what humans do?
Arguments against logic, sound logic. Go.
I wouldn't have to start a podcast and talk about it if everybody was for it, or
That's
even
right.
a lot of people were for it. So that answers your question.
So we are going to talk about libertarianism today, and basically, these are not debates. These are just open forum discussions, basically between three people with differing opinions, and myself, who agrees with Mark, and Mark is always right. But so I suppose we could just start with Mark. What brought you to libertarianism, and you and I can work together to make sure that there's not another episode of TriPartisan Triggering, because by the end of this, I guarantee you that John and Ryan will both be libertarians. So go ahead and take it away.
It'll just be called Libertarian Social Hour.
That's right.
Or something.
Mark, what brought you to libertarianism?
What brought me? Okay, how far back do you want me to go?
Birth.
I'll start at the beginning.
Conception.
Well, all right. I guess I'll start with my where I first became interested in politics, which was basically as a teenager, being in the car with my dad, who only listened to either doo-wop or talk radio, political talk radio. So it was always around.
Became a
I always
libertarian.
heard about it. And then that was it. And I listened to Rush Limbaugh, and then I was libertarian. Done. Now,
when you said doo-wop, I thought you said mbop by the Hanson.
I do remember.
Much more specific.
Mbop is great. So I can karaoke the shit out of it.
You've got the hair for it, too.
Neither here nor there. I am actually, what I'm really most famous for is being a member of, or a founding member of Hanson. That's actually the truth. Neither here nor
You've
there.
aged well, Mark.
Thank you. I'm actually 49 years old. Moving along. It's actually not that much older than I. Never mind. My age is irrelevant here. The point is, when I was growing up, I remember always being inquisitive, though. Like if I would hear something, or like my parents say something about politics, or not even, I guess, and or something on the radio, I'd be like, well, why is this even a thing? Why would they do this? Why does this need to be a law? I remember asking questions like that. I didn't really have a philosophy behind it. My dad was kind of a small government, personal responsibility, I guess, angle take of a Republican, I guess you might say, because he grew up and kind of did have a shitty childhood, but overcame a lot and, basically built his entire own life on his own blood, sweat, and tears. So he took that angle from it, less than really a philosophical angle, I think. So I guess that part was sort of in me a bit, but as I grew older, I did have a brief flirtation with sort of the left when I went very anti-war, and I've never stopped being anti-war. I just realized that they weren't either, so that's why I didn't really stay there too long. But my libertarianism specifically started in college when I met a gentleman who has been on The System Is Down talking about Freemasonry most recently, Howie Snowden, who he introduced me to the ideas. He told me about this author, Harry Brown. I read some of his books, and he told me about this guy, Ron Paul, who when he was he was a congressional page for a totally different congressman, but he had met Ron Paul a few times, talked to him about libertarian ideas, and that kind of sent him down the pathway as well. So he sort of infected me with that same bug, and it kind of went from there. So this is 7 or 8 years before Ron Paul even ran for president, and then kind of started that end of the libertarian movement, the modern liberty movement, you might say. But I was already, I didn't go around talking about libertarianism. I didn't really talk about politics with many people at all. It was more just a personal hobby and something I just kind of thought to myself and got mad at things that happened out in the world, and that was it. But it was really Ron Paul's bravery on the stage, decrying the war on drugs, decrying foreign wars, and saying bold things that you really, it might not even seem as crazy now to hear some anti-war sentiment and some, anti-drug war sentiment in the Republican Party. But in 2008, those were not Republican talking points in any way, shape, or form. He was literally laughed off stage for his positions, and then continued to come forward and say the things he believed in. So that his bravery really gave me the bravery to start speaking out a lot more and to be more open and transparent with my beliefs. And that eventually led to the best libertarian podcast on the planet, known as Lions of Liberty, The End.
I've heard of it. Mark, thank you for that. I wonder if anybody, I know that a lot of people.
There is so much nonsense going on the Skype while I'm trying to tell my story.
If you're watching the video version of this on YouTube, you'll get some bonus emojis that the other two are throwing up, which is great.
There was a heart
trying to concentrate on my light tail,
and I didn't realize that this feature existed. I found it. I just got kind of...
I'm glad you guys are having fun.
So, Mark, listening to you,
some shit when I hear about your political journey.
I know a lot of people listen to podcasts on like double speed, but I'm curious if they can actually pick up anything that you just said if they're actually listening to it on double speed, because I feel like that's what it was in real time. But
that is how I talk.
That's right. Give like your 30-second sales pitch, your elevator pitch for libertarianism, and we'll let the other two kind of rebuttal that.
Okay, well, I've learned over the years it's not necessarily the best thing to give a whole sales pitch on why you have to believe this. It's better to just sort of present your perspective. So I'm just going to try to present the very basics of the philosophy at the very base level, and maybe we can take off somewhere from there. And to me, at the end of the day, people get there in various ways. People get there through region and logical thought process. They get there through religious beliefs sometimes. But at the end of the day, you arrive at the idea that you do believe in self-ownership, that you believe that you own your body, and there are implications that kind of all go from there. I think the very first implication that does come from that is the non-aggression principle, the NAP, as John Schweppe referred to it earlier. And that is basically the idea that if you own your own body, by extension, everybody else must own their own bodies. So no action you take can violate the ownership of another's body. And that is, I guess, the very basics. And I've yet to hear anyone really make a logical counter to really even that general philosophical concept. When it gets nuanced is when you go in different directions and, have to talk about modern issues and applying this idea to our current political structure. I will admit there are many ways that has to become a little bit nuanced and a little bit more of a dialogue. But that's the very basics. Looks like Ryan has a question.
Ryan, your hand was raised during that last answer, so I'll give you a chance to respond. Go ahead.
I have a question. Is that an ethical perspective, the whole non-aggression principle?
Yeah, I would call it an ethical perspective. Yes.
Okay, so you taking any action which would violate someone else's sort of self-ownership of their body would violate that.
I would only qualify, with the exception of perhaps retribution for another violation. If someone steals from me and now they possess my, something that I have ownership over, then I can now, I suppose, violate their personal property and personal space to reclaim that or what have you. So, I mean, but otherwise, yes.
Does that mean that? So, I mean, the gist of it is that the way that extends to government is that government is just a collection of people taking steps to violate other people's personal. Is that how it applies? Is that how the connection?
I would say that from my point of view, in order to be consistent, we should apply the same exact ethic to individuals, or I should say the same exact ethic to government that we do to individuals. I would make no distinction from a moral perspective between the actions of a regular citizen human without a badge or any sort of government sort of certification or what have you, between that person and an agent of the government and what they should be morally allowed to do.
And it seems that you could that connection is that they're the people that actually vote for things which restrict your personal liberty. Those people are doing an ethical wrong by doing that. I
would concur. Yes.
Okay.
That would be my position.
Thank you.
And that means that I can slaughter them via genocide. No, I'm just kidding. That's not libertarianism, folks. That's being silly.
No, it has to be a proportional response.
Yeah, so I can kill, their firstborn child.
Right there.
For voting for the drug war or something. Yeah.
So, John, do you have any? I suppose the best way to approach this would be, Jon and Ryan, what makes you not libertarian? What do you disagree with in the things that Marc's pointed out so far?
Well, I mean, look, my come to politics, like, I mean, I've identified as a libertarian randomly throughout my history. I feel like I'm a fellow traveler with libertarians more than I'm not. I think that's true for conservatives, probably more so than progressives, just because of our views on the state and that sort of thing. But, generally, like, I find myself disagreeing with libertarians on a couple key issues, but the fundamental principles, I don't think I necessarily like have a disagreement with. And I also find the NAP to be a really interesting concept. And I feel like every libertarian debate ends up being like, who violated the NAP against who. But I mean, that principle I don't necessarily have a problem with. I think I probably support a stronger state than I would guess most libertarians do, because I'm skeptical of the ability of people to sort out these various NAP violations among themselves peaceably. And so I do think you need a state to kind of manage that. And I think that maybe the disagreement would be how large of a state or how, effective of a state that would be.
And to be fair, there is a, just to point out for people that don't really know libertarian philosophy that well, and I want to make sure I'm giving the full, skinny on the breakdown of different subsets of libertarians, at least in a minor extent. And there are definitely libertarians called minarchists, who I would still certainly put in the libertarian bubble, because we share so much in common especially about how we would apply our philosophy to our current situation, how much we would change, which is almost all of it. But there is a set of libertarians that would argue basically what you're saying. You might look for a stronger state than they would, but the minarchist position is essentially that we should have a government that basically protects life, liberty, and, well, just those two things, really, property. So.
Yeah. I mean, and that sounds, I'm not familiar with them, but that sounds pretty in line with my principles.
Only met the anarchists.
And caps, baby.
So, John, you said that there are certain things that you would disagree with on. What are they? Outside of just, like, general big state, statist mindset, like, what are the specifics that you disagree with?
I think, part of it is that they tend to be on issues I'm not as passionate about, which kind of helps me feel like I'm a fellow traveler with libertarians on most issues. I know the libertarians are generally split on abortion. That's my number one issue. So, but, the Austin Peterson sect of the Libertarian Party, LP,
He's a Republican now, but neither here nor there.
That's true. He did. He got a few percent against Josh Hawley.
Just because he wants to win.
But
it's kind of ironic as a very side note on that.
that he got about the same percentage he would have gotten. Yeah. But anyway, I forgot. I kind of lost my train of thought. Libertarians.
because he knows that there's.
Oh,
really
what do I
no
disagree with? I probably feel. I mean, I don't think that the drug war per se of locking up all these people has worked, but I probably would support stronger drug laws than most libertarians would. Not necessarily on, weed, maybe. I haven't really thought that out, but like I don't think heroin.
Let's think
should
it
be
out.
Let's think it
iron
out.
that out
That's
right
probably
now.
my number one issue.
Yeah.
Is the issue that I'm the most passionate about. I would say it's probably tied with foreign wars and unjust wars and aggressive wars and empire building wars.
John,
All the
Mark
wars,
loves drugs just as much as you love babies. So where you go abortion, he goes drugs.
Specifically,
I mean,
honestly-
my cop out on marijuana has always been I think the laws should be determined by the states.
That is
So
a compliment. I agree.
I mean it is but like
Now Dan's
so,
doing these emojis. What is
but,
this? I
but
don't
that
know how to do this.
that does signal like a lack of support for like the DEA and things like that. But
I signal that strongly as well.
I don't know. I mean, I've obviously partaken, so as a lot of people.
Whoa, I didn't know if that was
Say that
obvious.
again, John? What have you done,
John's
John?
actually high right now, so
I
he's
think
giggling
that
at all these emojis.
I'm not. I can say that.
But did you inhale,
but
John?
I am
Did you
drinking- I
inhale?
am
That's the
drinking
real
my
question.
lemonade. No, look, it's a tough question.
It's not. It's yes or no. Did you inhale? Continue.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm like Kamala Harris. Like I did it while listening to Snoop and
While
the
listening
system
to
is
the
down.
Beatles and the Rolling Stones when they first when their first albums were released. That's when you were getting-
While attending Beethoven Symphony conducted by Beethoven.
Yeah, he was incredible. It was revolutionary. I don't know. I mean, it's honestly a good question. I've never had to like vote on it, and I don't know how I would vote. I'm probably on the fence because I can see both sides, but
Are
ultimately,
we
I
just talking about marijuana or the war on drugs in general?
marijuana. If
Okay,
you
so
were,
let's
if
just
you're
do
asking
marijuana.
me marijuana legalization right now, if it was on the ballot, I'd probably vote in favor of it being legal. But I don't feel great about
You're
it.
you're in Illinois also, right?
I'm in Virginia.
You're in Virginia. Why did I think you were whatever? Okay.
He used to be.
I
you
moved
live
out
in-
to- Yeah, I used to live in Illinois.
You live in one of those kind of, states that are still a little backwards on drug laws, I would say, from my point of view.
Well, if they have drug laws, then they're a little backwards. But
Exactly.
so
they're all
John,
backwards.
John, you would vote in support of legalizing
'Cause I
marijuana.
don't-
How about cocaine?
I would probably say I think that should be illegal. I think most hard drugs should be illegal.
Mark?
I know that's not a big
Is
comment.
cocaine a hard drug?
I don't know. I've never done it. Would you qualify it as a hard drug? I mean, I think like
I think most popular. I think popular belief would say cocaine is a hard drug, but I don't see why.
I think before you're allowed to vote on drug laws, you have to have done the drug in question. That's my opinion. Before you can even do it at the booth, so you're under the influence of it when you vote on it. So you can
If you
say,
don't have
"Oh
a
wait,
uterus,
am I
you
really
can't vote
harming
on
someone
abortion."
right now? Oh wait, no, I'm not harming anybody. So of course this shouldn't be illegal." It should be legal.
cocaine is awesome. Check yes.
So Ryan, it sounds like you are more in favor of. Let's backpedal a little bit and or backtrack and what do you, Ryan, disagree with on libertarianism, and why do you not consider yourself one?
Well, and I'm happy to be alerted if I'm strawmanning here, but let's just.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say if you're gonna lead with that, you probably are. But go on.
Okay, so
I'm not a racist, but
Well, I
But they
Yeah,
did used to call me Coon Man, so
so like just under the rubric of the drugs thing, if I'm not harming anyone, I can do whatever I want. Essentially,
to yourself, I would say yes, you can essentially.
and then
That doesn't mean that it's a good thing or that people should not try to convince you to treat your body better and to do right by yourself. But ultimately,
Yeah.
you should not be
Fine.
harmed and thrown in a cage for harming yourself. You should have to bear the burden of the consequences of anything that results from that. Losing your job, for example. Now, if someone gets on,
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
claims
that's-
out of their
that-
job, they have state unemployment to back them up. So there's many factors in here that I think support people to be irresponsible because are so many sort of, I guess I'm not against anyway. I don't want to go down the social safety net shit, but
yeah, so that's
Yes,
actually what I'd like to get at a little bit because there seems to be obviously there's obviously a difference between certain drugs. Certain drugs are safer to use than others. I think it's a fair statement.
Yeah. I mean, soda's
and-
safer to drink than bleach. I think that's true of all substances.
And so what I've heard before is ideas that, like, if someone can't afford to go to the doctor, that's on them.
Yeah, that's certainly not the way I would phrase that.
So I think that I guess I really like the idea of social contract theory, which I'm not sure if that's necessarily. I don't think that's the same as the non-aggression principle.
No, I would say it's almost the opposite.
Well, because I mean, it's sort of, hey, I won't come punch you and steal your crops if you don't come punch me and steal my crops. And then that agreement sort of creates that sort of ethic. Whereas you're saying that ethic is born out of an inherent right to myself, right? Whereas
yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate. I would say that's an inherent right to being a human is the concept, just the starting axiom, you might say, that we own our own body. So every really thought from philosophical thought when it pertains to libertarianism, I'd say emanates at that very point. So if there's disagreement at that first point, that might be a place to start. If there's disagreement, if there's some agreement there, but then, some of the implications don't make sense to you, well, that would be a different avenue to go down. Yeah. I mean, Jon said he agreed with it in concept, but then listed all the 17 ways he wanted to, violate it. So I don't know if you really agree with the concept.
Yeah, I feel like I sort of agree with your conclusion. I mean, the non-aggression principle sounds fine enough to me. I just don't know if I don't know if I'm on board with the whole it coming from this singular reduction, not reductionist, but like sort of like. Yeah,
and not everybody gets there. My big thing is individual rights, and to me, that concept kind of predates the non-aggression principle from my point of view, but people get there in different ways. Some people just think it feels right. Not everybody gets to the conclusion of we should practice non-aggression against others from that same exact starting point. But
sure.
At the end of the day, that is where the implications come from.
So honestly, like the points where I end up differing is, if there's no person willing to pay for some schmuck's medical treatment who just OD'd in the street and got carried into an ER, I do think that as a society, we should probably just use our collective wealth to take care of that person.
Okay, well,
I'm okay with like forcing you to do that with your tax dollars.
Okay, so there's a few things there. So just the whole part of it's a very, I don't know how far down each specific thing we want to go just yet, but in terms of healthcare, I mean, there's a 3-hour dialogue I could do about all the reasons that healthcare costs so much more than it should, and why most people would never ever be in that scenario in the sort of much freer society that I envision. So just to kind of put that out there as one avenue. Let me think. What other direction was I about?
And I'm not trying to suggest that in a libertarian society, people are going to be dying in the streets.
I know. I'm not saying you weren't strawmanning that bad, but let me just think here. So, okay. So So you do agree with conceptually, sort of, maybe-ish, the non-aggression concept usually, but if there's someone you think needs help, you did, kind of say that at that point you think it's okay to force other people via taxes or what have you. So I guess the question is, like, would you be willing? Let's say you see someone in the street who just OD'd or whatever, they need to be brought back to life or something, or maybe we make it even more benign. Maybe it's just your grandmother. Not doesn't necessarily somebody we could say, well, they brought it on themselves. Let's just say someone who definitely didn't bring it on themselves. Someone who's very ill, that has cancer and can't afford the treatment or what have you. And then she has no hope. She has no way to pay for this. So of all the options, these emojis, I don't even know how to do this, which is the worst, because I can't even fight back. I have no idea how to use these emojis.
I was just waiting.
This whole show is going to be about emojis right. Because you guys can't pay attention for 2 seconds on your own fucking podcast.
ADD.
Apparently, for Mark, emojis violate the nap.
This is one that you should be watching.
I'm interested in this because I do think I know where you're going, but I want to hear it.
Okay. Well, yeah, where I'm going is, would you be okay with you yourself going to my house and pointing a gun at me and demanding the money to pay for that, or to somebody else? Is it only because you're removed from being the person who has to do the forcing yourselves? That part is kind of farmed out to the government. Do you see a moral difference there, or is it just because it's easy because you don't have to go do it?
Well, I mean, I am in a small part taking part in it by my tax dollars contributing to it as well.
Correct.
There's a difference between I seem to be okay with that, but I don't really think it matters whether I'm okay with it because that's what the system is. If I was okay with it in one instance and not okay with the second instance, it has no effect.
Okay. Yes,
the system.
I agree.
but like if you were to ask me, would I be okay with the government coming and taking my entire savings to pay for one person? I would say no.
So is it only the amount and not the act? Like, is 90 okay? I guess we're talking about money now, but you know, if you decide maybe even 10% is enough, and I only want to give you 8, is it okay to murder me? Because that is what we're talking about at the end of the day. You're going to throw me in a cage, and I'm probably going to resist because I know that I'm going to go in this cage, and then you're going to have to kill me because that's the only way to, you know, combat that, my defense. So you're going to have to kill me to get this money. Is that okay with you?
It seems. Because
maybe you're going to help one person, but now you have to kill me to do that. So you just killed another person.
I'm not sure that that's entirely. I am okay with our system the way it. Well, not I wouldn't say the way it is, but I'm okay with the philosophical point behind it, which is that I am gonna be okay with taking a little bit from everyone to make sure that we have this sort of thing here. It seems different than walking into your house and pointing a gun at you. It just seems,
I know it seems different
like
because you don't have to do it.
But is it different?
And it usually doesn't happen that way, in which I describe, because most people do comply with paying taxes and that sort of thing, because most people know that at the end of the day they have to comply because those guns are there, is my point. Whether the gun is inside my house pointed at me or it's sitting in Washington, D.C. waiting to come to my house if it must, as long as we know the gun is there, it's there regardless of where it's physically located at the time of the threat, I would say. So. Yes.
You remind me
but you agree with that,
Zizek's idea of violence. But I guess I do agree.
I don't know who that is, but he sounds like we get along.
He's a crazy socialist from Slovenia.
Well, maybe we get along.
Actually, he's kind of a genius, but yeah. But I guess I am okay with that.
Okay, well, that's the first step is acceptance of what you really support. So
first step to recovery.
A lot of people
admitting you have a problem.
I'm not even joking around. Like a lot of people can't get past that point, right. And they kind of try to waffle and say, "Well, no, I don't really agree with it, but I do support it." But you're going all the way. I think that's impressive.
Well, because we do have, in order to effectuate that idea that I'm talking about, we have to have laws which have punishments associated with breaking them. So I guess if I do believe that is what our society should do, then that is obviously maybe there's better ways of making that happen and stuff, but yeah, I guess I do think that.
John, you want to weigh in?
Well, so I was thinking about this, and I think this is my second time around. Maybe I'll do a little better this time. But I was thinking about the nap, and I think that's really where I have the biggest struggle.
John thinks about the nap more than anybody else in this circle.
No, he talks about it.
No, I was obsessed with the nap when I dabbled. So, but my biggest frustration is okay, so where do I disagree with libertarians? Probably drugs, prostitution, maybe even porn.
So the entire philosophy. But
all of it, libertarianism is where it ends for me.
All of those things, I would argue there's, for example, if I sell you fentanyl, am I not violating the nap by selling you fentanyl?
Okay, and I think that's a totally interesting way to look at it because fentanyl is a very specific example. So to me, fentanyl is usually people are not trying to take fentanyl. Like when most of these fentanyl deaths we have, they're trying to take heroin or cocaine, right? I mean, it's usually in something.
Fentanyl.
Right. And in that case, that would be fraud to the extent that it is, I would even consider it murder. So I would consider that in that case, a violation of the NAP, of course. I would encapsulate. What's that?
Maybe something that crack. Something that I don't know. I'm not a drug expert, so
the question is whether the person knows what they are getting and is getting the thing they know they are, not getting something fraudulent that they don't know will kill them. At the end of the day, if you are taking something that you know what it is and someone is voluntarily selling it to you, you have two people in that transaction and no one is having their rights violated as far as I'm concerned. That doesn't mean it's a good transaction for, a numerous amount of reasons. And I would certainly want a society where we discourage people in many ways, socially, perhaps with all the repercussions that will likely occur in their professional lives if they go down bad paths. And I want them to be able to get help and not be criminalized. And I would say not all of, but 99%, 98% of the problems associated with drug use, and there are serious problems associated with certain drugs for sure. I'm sure any substance. I know people that probably drink too much caffeine. There's problems with anything. And I know a lot of people that eat too much sugar. There's problems with anything we can consume. I want a society where none of the problematic things that we can consume make someone go into a cage for consuming them. I want a society where, because these are not criminalized, because they're not in the underground and pushed that way, it is very much easier for people to actually get help when they have these problems.
So, John,
I have a question.
Real quick,
I have a question.
John, hold on. John,
can someone tell me how to do the emojis?
That's Mark's question. John, so basically, John, your question is, if I were to pay you to assassinate me, should you go to prison for it? Or should I go to prison for it? Should I go to prison for trying to have somebody kill myself?
See, I think I should go to prison for it.
Why? I told you to do it.
Because I think it's whether you told me, whether you provided consent or not.
Okay, if you try to do it and fail, should I go to prison for it?
That's kind of like the classic, like, should somebody be put to death for failing to kill themselves? Like,
right.
I guess in that scenario, I'm more sympathetic to the victim, obviously being in a state of, it's the same thing with drug laws. Like, I'm more sympathetic to the user than I am to the dealer. I don't know if that's arbitrary or not, but that's just my. But going on what I was saying, like, I think that drugs is one thing, and I think you can make the argument like, somebody's using drugs effectively and not killing themselves or exploiting themselves. But I think it gets a little bit murkier when you're talking about. Let's talk about prostitution.
Do you eat sugar, John?
Oh, I love sugar. I drink so much.
Do you know sugar is like way more addictive than cocaine?
I believe it. I can't.
He's drinking a Mike's Hard Lemonade right now. What do you think? It's 90% sugar.
Should Kellogg, or I don't even know who makes sugar products, should Hostess be jailed for selling you that sugar?
It's a slow.
Should Little Debbie?
Should Debbie
lock
herself,
her up? Lock her up.
should a SWAT team bust into Little Debbie's house and toss her in a fucking cage for the rest of her life? And this is a joke, but it's not, because this is exactly what happens.
Well,
SWAT teams break into people's houses at 4 a.m., shoot their fucking dogs, set off tear gas in their house, and scare the shit out of their kids because they sold something consensually to somebody. It's the same exact thing.
I'm totally okay with shooting of the dogs, but everything else I disagree with.
I know,
Ryan. Ryan had a question.
This goes back to my question, which is, at one point, when talking about you want people to, you don't think it's a good transaction, right?
I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying it doesn't mean every transaction is okay. How am I trying to say this? Just because I think something shouldn't be criminal doesn't mean it's always the right decision or a good thing to do. I just think it shouldn't be criminal.
Right.
Ryan, yeah. So
you should be allowed to kill yourself. I don't want you to kill yourself, though, but you should be allowed to.
Right. So the transaction that's consensual of heroin, right?
Correct.
Can we just? I just want to assume for a second that people using heroin is not optimal for society. And maybe you have a problem. Maybe that's not categorically true.
Okay, well, I say it's not categorically true at all. I would say the modern day usage of black market heroin is probably terrible for almost everyone who uses it. 100 years ago, it was just another painkiller, another thing that people took in small dosages prescribed by a doctor, and was much safer. And I'm not that nobody got addicted to it, just like more than nobody gets addicted to modern day opioids. But it was seen as a medical issue, not a criminal one, and that's my take on it as well.
Okay, and when you say issue, and let's assume that it's the bad kind, right? Like the modern day.
I wasn't even calling it the bad kind in that concept, but yeah, okay, I got you. We'll assume that it's as bad as it is now. I guess my point is to talk about today
is it bad for society?
I guess society is something to define there first, but I think it's bad if someone destroys their own body, becomes destitute, can't work, and that sort of thing. That doesn't describe everybody who ever does heroin or ever takes a drug.
And so my question is,
I don't think it's categorically bad to take any amount of any drug that I could define as just saying this is always bad for every person in every circumstance. I don't think I can say that.
Okay, all right. Let's say that someone who's only taking drugs and not working and neglecting their children.
Okay.
And not providing,
and there's deleterious
not
things
contributing anything.
Sure. Or
Okay.
maybe, abusing others or stealing to get money for it. What have you? Or am I going too far than you want to?
Let's not go with steal. Let's just say that they're destroying their own bodies and not finding personal fulfillment in life. Is that just bad for them, or is it bad for society to have these people?
Is there a welfare state?
That's one question. I agree. That is a good question. Because if there is a society that is socially contracted to take care of them no matter what happens to them, then it certainly is, categorically bad for society to have to take care of a new person who's doing this bad thing, which is another argument for the drug war. And it's another reason I'm opposed to the entirety of the system.
And so it seems to me that if it's and so the only reason I'm trying to do this step by step is because I want to find out if there is a certain type of thing that is bad for society, and if so, shouldn't society have something in place to try to right or try to undo or combat that badness? And now it doesn't have to be a criminal justice system, right? And maybe that's where the libertarian differs with other philosophies. Is some people like we got to criminalize it, we got to do this to make that happen. And maybe you agree that it's bad for society and there needs to be things in society in place, but you just think it's not the criminal justice system.
Okay, maybe here's an example going away from the drug war, just because I think I am opposed to being racist. I think being racist is bad. I think it's stupid. I think nobody should be racist. I think being racist is probably one of the most ignorant positions you could possibly take as a human being, and I think it should be 100% legal. So I think racism, the concept, is bad for society. I think that's like a concept I could say is bad. And I would say when I say be racist, I guess we should define things there. Because I just opened up a whole new big can of worms. And I don't know why I thought racism would be a simple example. Now I'm like, wait a minute, these implications.
Let's assume speech only racism. Okay?
Yes, let's define
that fix it.
Correct. I think it does for now, yeah, because there are many implications to discrimination, and there's 20 different avenues we could go down, then we could not. But for this particular example, yes, speech racism should be 100% legal, and it's 100% stupid. So that's just, I guess one example if we're talking about what's bad for society that I would think of. I don't think someone categorically using heroin or not is necessarily good or bad for society. It is categorically bad if there's a welfare state that is contracted to take care of that person.
Okay.
It's bad for his local society, maybe his neighborhood, his family, his friends. Again, though, so many of those problems are simply because it's illegal. Like, almost all of that problem. So most of the problems that we negatively associate with drug use right now are entirely stem from the fact that they're illegal in the first place. So it's almost talking in circles. It's saying if these 9 bad things happen, but the whole point is these 9 bad things aren't happening, or they're much, much greatly exacerbated and much, much able to be better addressed by society, by organizations voluntarily, than if it's in the criminal realm. So I would say that I understand your premise, but I think in reality, in a society where these things aren't criminalized, most of your premise isn't really even the case.
Okay. So with your hate thing, or with your racism thing, your speech racism.
Why was it
since
my racism thing?
so since you and I'm not.
Okay, we can go down the.
We agree that
the whole package. So
we agree that it's bad for society.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we have to define society. I just think racism's stupid and it doesn't really benefit anybody, because I think the maximum transacting intellectually and transactionally in terms of trade is the best thing for everybody involved. Okay. So to put barriers up that in your own to yourself is very stupid.
So instead of bad for society, how about, let's say, does not create an optimal society? How about that?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Should society
just like I think free
something?
Markets are better. I think
so prisons are optimal for society either.
So should we collectively, as a society, do something to make it or ourselves more optimal by combating the things that make us less optimal? That's
Yes.
that's the question.
Yes, we should, through nonviolent means and through persuasion and not violence. Because if we're participating in violence to achieve a wrong, we're committing, to me, the absolute wrongest of wrongs in order to right some other wrongs that we see as wrong. So we're doing wrong to fix wrong, and now we're in a whole circle where other people are trying to use those same levers of wrongness to put their version of what society should do upon others. And now we're all fighting over who's president, so we can get, so Washington, D.C., we can tell what some people in D.C. are going to do and what wrongs we're going to right using violence all over the country via this lever of government. Whereas, hey, maybe we just talk about things and try to convince people of what's right and wrong. That's my stance.
That doesn't.
Hey guys, this is Dan's wife, Kayla. I just wanted to interrupt this podcast to let you know that he puts a lot of work into it for currently no monetary profit, and he has a family to feed. To do so, he runs his own media business called Goulash Media. Dan has a crazy creative brain that makes him uniquely able to take your project, whatever it may be, and make it the full package. So whether you're in need of graphic design, logos, branding, commercials, wedding videos, podcast jingles, music production, music videos, merchandise, websites, pictures, or what have you, contact Dan and he'll seriously make you look and sound awesome. For more information, just go to goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where Dan caters to the little guy with the big vision.
Rebuttal.
Let's transition a little bit. John brought up prostitution a half hour ago. So prostitution.
Paging Robert Kraft.
Go ahead, John. What do you have against prostitutes?
I have nothing against prostitutes. I just think they're victims of exploitation. Whether it be now, there's the obvious like low-hanging fruit I could point to with like people who are trafficked, who go into prostitution, and that's obviously not a voluntary action. But even people who are, say, falling on economic hard times and then feel forced to sell themselves, sell their bodies for money to survive, I would say that's exploitation
to McDonald's
too.
right after I left my parents' house.
Yeah, but I just think there's a fundamental difference, and this is where maybe I'm like a prude and a total social conservative, but like I think I see someone transacting with a prostitute as close to that person raping that prostitute morally. And maybe that's you know,
So,
my moral beliefs clouding
before
it.
we get into the actual political discussion, imagine being the 75-year-old man who's never gotten any. And somebody else is like, hey,
Robert Kraft.
hey, sure, yes.
I think he's gotten plenty.
You're probably
some
right.
hot woman's like, hey, for, $100, I'll, fulfill your dream before you die. And that's wrong.
Well, what's the condition of it though? Like, who's getting the money? Who put her
She
up
is.
to it?
She is getting the money.
He hands her $100 bills. She puts it in her bra.
Can I just can I enter butt here? Because I think enter butt. That's such a funny word. Is it even a word? I don't know.
I don't think it is.
Can I enter butt?
That's the old guy, the prostitute. This is interbutt.
I think what we're already doing, much like with the drug war, is we're tying a problem of a consensual activity, a problem that exists once again, almost entirely because of the illegality of the consensual act. So I can already see John's going into the idea, is this, and we might get into the exploitation thing, separately, but you're kind of going in the direction of, is someone forcing this woman to do this? Is this person being trafficked? I think that's what you're kind of saying there. You're saying like, who's telling her to do it? And this is a condition, again, that only exists because it's been pushed underground to the black market because of the illegality of it. In Amsterdam, there are no pimps that are abusing women and forcing them into prostitution. There are women who can consensually go into the profession and make a shit ton of money and are very, very happy and unexploited by anyone. Now, I'm not saying that there might not be psychological implications that might go on with someone who, becomes a prostitute and sells their body, and maybe they're less desensitized to sex, and maybe they can't love someone sexually as much. Like, I'm sure, I have no doubt there are plenty of potential, psychological problems that can go along with consensual activities like that, or with anything someone might do. But again, any problems that do go along with it are exacerbated by the illegality of it. and are, or that, or entirely created by the illegality of it. So human trafficking, which they now try to tie to every time there's a prostitution, this Robert Kraft thing, they already admitted like 2 days later, oh, there's actually no trafficking situation here. This is just normal freaking hand jobs that we're freaking out about. Normal freaking hand jobs, folks.
There's also an interesting libertarian point in the idea that, like, yeah, there may be all these really bad things that happen to the person, 10 years after they retire being a prostitute. But you could say, yeah, that was part of the deal.
Right.
Like, you took on that risk in exchange for the opportunity.
It's the same as a professional football player. You go into professional football, you might get a concussion. That's part of the deal. You decided to do that. You got paid really well to do it.
No,
you reap the consequences of it.
That's a good comparison.
Or boxers. I think boxers are obviously knowingly. I mean, I'd be surprised if at this point they're just being ignorant if they want to pretend they're not knowingly doing something extremely harmful and dangerous to their brain.
Punch me in the head 100 times. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and they're doing it because they choose to, and society pays them, the successful ones anyway, a whole ton of money to do it, and they weigh that risk against the reward that they get of the personal satisfaction it brings them and maybe the monetary gains they get from it, and they decide to do it anyway. And I might not let my kid be a football player or a boxer, but I watch them both. I don't know what the point of that was.
He also watches prostitution.
Or a lawyer.
Mark also watches prostitution on a regular basis, so
isn't this an argument then also? And this is a big straw man, so get ready for it. But like, wouldn't you say this is an argument for indentured servitude too? I mean, you're getting something out of it, right? Like, I mean, it's a contract.
Indentured. I have no problem with someone agreeing to contract to serve someone as like their servant for X number of years.
I was an indentured servant for McDonald's for 3 years. What's the problem with
Isn't every job indentured servitude for X amount of time? Well, yeah. So yeah, I guess so.
Is there anything that someone should not be allowed to contract to because it's so unfair?
Like for themselves? Like,
Yeah.
I don't think someone should be able to contract to murder somebody else. Because that's
nothing's unfair if you're agreeing to it.
No. Hold on a second. Let's say it's an economic thing. It's if you take me across, if you, I don't know, this indentured. If you loan me this money right now, if you give me $100 right now, I'll pay you $50,000 in 1 year. And if I don't pay you $50,000, it'll increase by $50,000 every year that I don't pay you. Like, is there ever an economic contract that is so lopsided that it should not be enforced?
Okay, so I think there's something to that, to the extent lopsided isn't the right direction I would go to it, but I think
unconscionable.
Now we're getting into contract law and that sort of thing. I mean, I think there is such a thing as contracts that are so absurd that you could say it wasn't a valid contract in the first place. I don't know if that, but in terms of philosophically coming to an agreement, I don't know why you need that $100. If maybe you're some billionaire that can't access that $100 right now for some situation you're in, and you really only need the 100, but you're a billionaire, so you don't give a shit about giving me a $50,000 in a year once you sort this whole thing out, or the $50,000 after that because you got all the money. You just really need the $100 right now. So your time preference is towards having that $100. So I see nothing at all wrong with the concept of that contract. And I mean, I don't know why that would ever exist. It seems absurd. Well, but conceptually,
outlawing
the reason that they don't exist right now is because there are certain restrictions and regulations on.
No, they don't exist because who's going to make that deal? Yeah, I think, and who's, especially if the contract is enforced, who's going to make a deal where they get $100 and owe like $100,000?
Really, really desperate people who are stupid.
That's what I just said. Outlawing stupidity is what you're proposing.
But then they violated the contract, and there's a consequence for that. So I'm not saying that they should get away with it. Or you're saying that they should be protected from their own stupid contract.
Exactly.
I mean, no. The protection is the person on the other end who wants to agree to that contract.
I mean, I think that's where we that's like a difference. Yeah, because like I think there's got to be some point where we aren't going to let the people who have power take advantage of people who are desperate.
Who took advantage of anyone in this circumstance? Not the person that had the power. The person that had the power is the guy that with $50,000 to give out for having 100.
No, because that person doesn't have $50,000 to give back.
Oh, okay. You're saying if it's a fraud situation.
No, not a fraud situation. Well, someone needs $100 to feed their family today, and you say, "Okay, I'll give you $100 if you give me $1,000 in a year." They're not going to be able to come up with that $1,000, but they need that $100 so badly that they'll agree to it now, and then get fucked later. That's
Like
So
we're talking about payday. This is legal. Like we're talking about payday loan servicers. And that's basically literally what they do. Like I don't know if it's 100 to 1,000, but it's that type of thing. And so Tucker Carlson talked about this in his monologue that went viral a month ago. But like, is that a social good? Like they're obviously it's a mutual contract. Both sides are agreeing to it. Is that a social good that makes society better, that helps these people? And
If both parties want to make the transaction and have analyzed the risk and reward, I'm not saying the guy that can't pay it back later should be murdered and strung from the streets. I'm saying the guy that made the loan should have to eat the loss. If someone makes that bad of a deal on their end, then so be it. I'm not saying every contract violation or disagreement should end in death for the person that should have made the deal, but there should be provisions in the contract of whatever. And I think payday loans actually do provide a very valuable service to some people that do need money sooner and they couldn't get it anywhere else. Of course, that's the trade-off. But again, in a much freer society, I don't think people are going to need payday loans. So it all goes back to, a lot of the originality of things, where I don't think much of the situations we see in real life now would be anywhere near the same existence if we had a totally different kind of society.
I have a hard time accepting that argument because it's the third time I've heard it from you now, which is basically if my worldview was implemented, we wouldn't have all these problems. Yeah. And you just keep saying
if society passed a bunch of bad laws that cause a bunch of problems, I'm going to state that and not pretend that these are just things that crop up out of nowhere and then we got to blame libertarian ideas on it because it's absurd. So of course you're going to keep hearing that because it's true. Now, the last example is a less direct one, in fairness, than the more specific cases of the drug war and prostitution. I mean, that is a more an idea, and so maybe that's not the best place to put that as well. Just people, being wealthier and that sort of thing. But I, of course, do believe that if we had a much freer society, there would be much greater wealth and much less need for that sort of thing. But I'm not saying it wouldn't exist. I'm not saying in a libertarian society any of these bad things we're talking about wouldn't exist. I'm saying they'd be much easier to address and people have a much easier time getting help for them if the illegality was removed. I do need to think more about the contract thing. It's an interesting, I haven't really thought about that in that deep of a way yet as I have with some other issues. So, I think there might be arguments in some case for fraud or that sort of thing. Maybe if you the person can't actually ever pay it and then maybe there's some illegitimacy to even the origination of the honesty of the contract, so to speak. I'd have to think about it deeper. I think there's potentially some nuance there that, I haven't thought of. But conceptually, can someone borrow a small amount of money to pay back a ridiculous amount of money if they make that decision and the other person thinks they're actually going to get the money back? Sure.
When Jon was talking about the payday loans and things, he said things like good for society. I don't know if he said good for society, societal good. He said things like that. Like, are those
if
are
both
those
parties benefit, it's a good. I don't see. I think this concept of society is something we keep getting back to. So maybe we need to delve into it a little bit more. But
that's
what is society?
Is that something
society?
That
the dictionary defines society as the aggregate of people living together in a more or less ordered community. Drugs, crime, and other dangers to society. I don't know how that relates, but. That's
so
the
like
dictionary.
we keep it's kind of an abstract thing like good for society. Well, A, what does that even mean?
Abstract.
2, who gets to determine what is good and like whose opinion is it? Blah blah blah. So is that even something that comes into a libertarian's analysis? Really?
Well, I think what's good for individuals is ultimately the same thing as what's good for whatever conception of society you might have. But
okay.
But anyway, okay. So there's different ways to look at society. By the definition Dan just read, it specifically mentioned community. And I do think that there is a lot more power and strength in communities organizing, not in the coercive way that our federal or even state governments organize now, but communities organizing to do certain things like, I don't know, voluntarily chip in for like a library. I don't know, voluntarily chip in for firefighters if that's what y'all want to do when it's on that community level. Not necessarily forcing everybody into that agreement, but you could say a lot of cities and towns almost even mimic something that could be seen as a contractual agreement as well. I wouldn't phrase it quite that way, but is there a huge difference between moving into an HOA where the contract and what you're supposed to get from that, and moving into a city and town where what your property taxes are going to be and what you're supposed to get from that? there is there is a difference, but they're not, vastly different things. But to me, that kind of community organizing and on that very community level, if you want to call that a society, that's one kind of society. But when people seem to talk about society now, they seem to be talking about I don't know. It's very unclear. Everybody on the globe, everybody in the geographical location of the United States of America, which is really 50 small countries that have hardly anything in common in many ways culturally. Is it all of North America? Is it this Milky Way galaxy? I have no idea what anybody is talking about when they say society. So if we're talking about communities and that sort of thing, yeah, I think there are a lot of small scale issues that individuals could do right or wrong that will affect their local communities. I don't think what I do here in California really affects somebody in Jakarta, and they shouldn't be making decisions about what I do here unless they're directly harming them somehow. So I think we should look at all this stuff on a much more community level and how something is affecting somebody's community than saying, let me look off this hilltop in Washington, D.C. or anywhere else in the world and look at all the potential problems in the world and try to organize all of us as a society or community to try to fix them. Because despite what may be well intentions at times, only bad problems ensue when you try to enforce your sort of views of what's right and wrong, across all of the world here. So I really went on a whole rant about society there.
So I'm good with that. I mean, applying subsidiarity.
Oh, thank God, John's a libertarian again.
To the concept of
Welcome back,
society
John.
and just saying it's community. I'm okay with that. But my biggest thing, I was thinking about this, like, what do I mean by bad for society? And I think I'm weighing two things. So obviously, like, we'll go back to a contract, because honestly, drug deals, prostitution, all these things amount to contracts that I would say are bad for one party and good for the other. So in the short term, obviously, a contract is good for both sides, or it wouldn't be agreed to, right? Even in the payday loan example.
Or they at least think it is in the moment. I'm not saying every contract works out well for both parties at all.
So that's I guess where I'm wondering is, does the state have a responsibility to intervene when individuals make bad decisions for what is, a long-term decision? So, like, if I have, my family's starving and I need to go get bread, and I agree to a payday loan for $100 and I have to pay indefinitely half my salary the rest of my life. Like, I think that's where, I know we just upped it.
Now you are talking about
If my straw man family is starving to death on the street.
What I'm saying is, sorry, maybe I shouldn't have gone with such an extreme example, but I think that there's
I think it's very telling that you guys need to come up with ridiculous scenarios to even try to, refute this stuff. Come up with a real one, like, okay. And the payday loan thing, I'm not saying that's not a real one, but
does meth kill people? Can we just agree for 1 second that meth kills people?
Do guns kill people, John?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that guns should be legal?
I think people kill people with guns.
Do you think that meth kills people, or people kill themselves with meth?
There's no right to meth in the Constitution. Like,
whoa, we're not talking about the Constitution.
No, I'm just saying, like
out of nowhere. The Constitution just came in here.
Well, Dan brought up guns. Okay. My point is this: like, is meth bad?
John, sugar kills people. So if you're going to make the argument for meth, and I am telling you the truth, more sugar kills more people than meth. So if you're going to make the argument for meth, please make it for sugar and go arrest little Debbie.
I'm just
asking for consistency.
No,
you can tell me sugar doesn't kill people. It's like the biggest diabetes and obesity is the biggest epidemic. It's directly caused by sugar and our overconsumption of it. It's obviously killing people. Why aren't you for banning it if you're for banning meth? I just want some consistency here.
It's a much longer long term than the long term.
Oh, okay. So long term murder is fine.
Slow murder is okay.
If it's like over
Quick
a year
murder,
or two, like what's
so
your
much.
timeline here?
Super long term isn't bad for society. Medium long term.
One of my professors, who's a sort of a little Marxist fella, who's one of the funniest and smartest people I've ever met.
A Marxist professor, get out of here.
Wrote a huge, no, like literally. Well, I don't know about Marxist, but he wrote huge. He's very anti-smoking, and he described it as slow motion suicide. And I always thought that was a really good turn of phrase.
Which should be entirely legal.
Is meth?
Well, yeah, and I mean, but sugar is a slow motion suicide. ODing on heroin is much more instant. but Mark's point is totally legit, which is that, yeah, I agree with everything Mark said about sugar.
But John, and also if we're gonna talk about meth, I'm gonna do it again, Ryan. I'm sorry. Meth only exists because of the black market in drugs. I mean, it was created as a much cheaper alternative to more expensive, drugs that have similar effect. And it's a cheapened down black market version that would like literally never exist if drugs were just still something you bought at the pharmacy and did it in accordance with the doctor, or even did it recreationally. The fact is, it's because of the extreme price driven by the black market that has created these cheaper alternative drugs like crack or like meth or like bath salts. These things literally only came about because of the black market in the first place. So I'm going to do it again and say in libertarian society, meth is hardly ever came about.
I'm okay with that one because I see the cap. Because
I love meth.
Because but no, I totally. I mean, that's true. Like meth. It was ingenuity to meet a market demand. It was a capitalist
market demand entirely created by the black market.
By the unavailability of
the demand for a substance that does that is not created by the black market, but the demand for a cheaper alternative, or and that is a cheaper, more dangerous alternative, which is because of the black market. It's because of the war on drugs.
John,
I'm just saying, either support a war on drugs and a war on sugar, or don't support either. Just choose one.
John, and I like sugar a lot, so.
Well, a lot of
probably
people
like meth. Have you tried it?
A lot.
No, I think that's a compelling argument. I will take the L, and
in fact, I bet a lot of people that do those drugs don't feed it to their kids, and a lot of people that do feed sugar to their kids. I'm not saying you do or don't. You have.
I actually am really trying to avoid feeding sugar.
I'm not addicted to it. But point being, you could argue sugar is way more dangerous because children all over the globe are eating it in droves, and at least most people don't. I mean, I'm sure there's some kids that do meth, but I'm just saying.
I mean, the point I was trying to make, and I get that this is true over the very long term, right?
I'll lay off the sugar. I don't know when it became a health Nazi, but
if we accept meth as the drug and don't go into like whether it there would be healthy drugs in a libertarian society. Like,
I'm not even saying healthy drugs, but I am saying that
if you do meth 50 times, do you die? I honestly don't know. I just assume.
No, I'm only at 47.
But
tune in next time, folks.
Tune in in 3 weeks
for
sugar
dual partisan triggering.
I'll pray for you, Mark.
In case my dad's listening, I don't really do that.
Maybe that's not a good argument, but like that's kind of there's an immediacy to the dangers of drugs that isn't there for sugar.
No, I don't think that's a good argument.
There's a real immediacy to shooting yourself in the face. Don't do it. Don't shoot yourself in the face.
Although it's interesting. I mean, the way, as far removed as we are maybe mentally from the effects of sugar on our bodies, because maybe we don't see it that instant, we're similarly removed from the violence of the way we use government now. And, because we don't have to go around pulling triggers, we're not seeing it right away, or we're not really even seeing it ever. I think it makes it more palatable. So the fact that you don't see the results of the sugar right away, you might not see it for 15, 20, 30 years, makes it more palatable. So I think there's an analogy there somewhere.
I like it. I like where you're going with that. I was hoping it would go on further.
I did.
I was too, but it just
did something called Whole30 a couple years ago.
I did that too. Mad weight.
I lost mad weight, and but actually, same. But what I would say it actually is. I would say it was pretty immediate. The difference, the difference in the way I felt. Sure. Whole30, John. All you eat is meat, vegetables, fruit, and healthy fats like olive oil, coconut oil.
Not even all fruits. Yeah, it's very defined. But I felt amazing like a week later.
Yeah. So basically,
lost a ton of weight.
It basically means that you cannot have anything that has added sugar to it, or sugar itself, or any sugar substitutes or anything, and no dairy as well, and no grains or anything. Sorry to just talk about this little eating plan.
No.
Within like a week or two, my sinuses opened up. My sense of smell went through the roof. I had so much more energy. Like I actually totally agree with Mark. I believe that sugar is probably the most
great example. This is a great example because how you felt physically after a couple weeks off of sugar is how you will feel mentally after a couple weeks off of advocating for state violence.
Boom. There's the analogy. I knew it was there somewhere.
My sense of smell went through the
End
roof.
the show
after I
now.
started
Argument over.
So I feel like that is pretty close to a good place to wrap it. However, we gotta kind of like wrap it up here and get final thoughts on these things. This is not Health Corner with Marc and Ryan. This is talking about libertarianism. So
I think me and Ryan should start a whole 30 plan that we sell to your audience.
I'm down if I can take the rewards.
The first customer.
Even if it's a bad contract, I'll sign it. Jon and Ryan, what are your...
You'll advance $50,000 every year for the rest of your life and give us 2 of your children.
Jon and Ryan, how much more close to libertarianism are you? And do you have any final... I mean, this can go on a little bit longer if you have any final things that you're like, but still, that doesn't make sense, even if something else does. Any final thoughts?
No, I thought Mark's arguments were really compelling. I mean, I think my biggest issue is that, and I suppose this makes me a statist to a degree, but I think that humans have a certain dignity about them that sometimes we're not able to protect ourselves.
So the government can?
So I think that there are certain laws that make sense to I don't want to say enforce, because I'm not meaning like you just send everyone to prison if they don't.
Jon, do you trust the government more than yourself?
No.
Well, then you're a libertarian. Welcome.
But do you know what I mean? I guess that maybe that's like the sticking point for me, is just that like I do think that people sometimes make really bad, like I'm just thinking, I know this is another drug thing.
I don't think anyone disagrees that people make bad choices all the time.
And guess what runs the government? People. They make bad decisions within the government and outside of the government. So what's the difference?
Now it's not fair because me and Dan are teaming up on you.
So
I said that from the start. That's what's going to happen.
Maybe you can answer this, Marc, because like this is like the quintessential example. I know Ryan's probably familiar with it, but that case, awful case in Iowa of the parents who did meth and the kid died in his diaper. Like,
well, they're criminals and they should be treated.
Obviously, that's easy to say, right? Like that they
violated the nap, Jon.
But their wrong is not doing meth. Their wrong is having a drug problem that led to the death of their child, which are different things. I'm not saying that meth will never lead to people being irresponsible. I'm saying that you should not punish 100% of users of something, 98% of which probably never kill a baby as a result, because 2% or whatever did. Or it's probably even not 2%. It's probably nowhere near that.
To inflame this even more, Marc, do you think it's okay to drink and drive?
Wow. How long do we have?
You got 30 seconds. Go.
That's actually a very difficult question. Okay. Fuck, that's a really hard one.
I didn't think of that. That's actually really good.
And it is I think it's a nuanced conversation. It's absolutely wrong to harm someone via something you did in your car. Accident or not, you should have to recompensate them, even if it's accident. That's your fault anyway, I should say. I think that our current laws regarding drunk driving are arbitrary and incorrect in their application. I do think here we are in a more free society where the roads were more seen and less as a privilege for everybody to use and more as something you contract to and something you have agreements to go on. Then there will be, I don't think road owners and people that are going to be held responsible for what goes on their roads, I think they are going to want standards for people to be on those roads, including, insurance and including proof of safe driving, including knowing they're not impaired and cannot operate the vehicle. So I do think that, but our application of that, where a state is just deciding if you are at 0.04, which is actually a literal, I think it was, I don't remember what state. Some state is trying to go to 0.04. I don't think that it's criminal because of an arbitrary number. I do think if you're unable to operate a vehicle you're doing it dangerously, even if you don't hurt someone, that is a problem that should be addressed. So I'm not even saying that a lot of libertarians will say, well, if they didn't harm anybody, No, I'll even say if you were operating it at a level of dysfunction that you could easily harm someone on that road, that should also be considered illegal. I just don't think that our application of that through the state is proper and the proper way to go about it. But just the concept of having a beer and then driving at an arbitrary level that may or may not be affecting your ability to drive as someone else's. No, like not on the base level of any amount of alcohol, and even that is not an agreement. Every state has a different way that they look at when it's wrong and when it's right. But I agree that's a difficult nuanced thing.
Ryan.
Yes, Ryan is raising his hand.
Is the reason that's an interesting argument because you could drive drunk and very dangerously and not actually violate the the NAP?
Well, you added that's why it's an interesting argument. Because yes, you could even be driving dangerously and accidentally, by
driving through a field
fate,
and not harm anybody.
You could by fate not harm anybody or not harm anybody's property, and you got lucky. So that's why I think it is a little bit of a difficult topic, because I don't think people should just be able to drive no matter their level of impairment. I certainly don't believe that. Because I do believe at some point you are so just like, okay, you could stand around in a circle with a machine gun and fire it everywhere, and you could not hurt anybody, But I wouldn't advocate. I would say that in that case, like that's dangerous enough that it's irresponsible and therefore should be stopped if someone sees you doing it. So I think you can make a similar argument if someone is driving a vehicle so dangerously, and even being a little bit impaired could be considered so dangerously potentially, that there is an argument for intervening in that situation. So I think it is a nuanced topic. I don't think that everybody is the same. My 2 beers at dinner and, a 16-year-old girl's, why am I having dinner with a 16-year-old girl? I don't know, but they're probably different levels, and even blood alcohol
levels. We weren't assuming
levels,
that you were having the dinner with her. That was your statement, but okay.
I always go down weird directions.
So it's almost. I think you could be consistent with the non-aggression principle by just saying like, there's a certain level of dangerousness, which
I guess is my position.
Multiplied by the chance of that actually happening.
Pretty hard to make a law around that, though.
But where is that line? And that's why I think it's difficult to really say.
Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily inconsistent with the non-aggression, although you're clearly more knowledgeable about that. But like if you're creating a high enough chance of harm to other people, there's a certain threshold where it's like, yeah, you can't do that.
I have a position that libertarians might not agree with. I think it's immoral and a violation of the non-aggression principle to own a nuclear weapon. Not necessarily a targeted nuclear weapon, but to own a nuclear weapon, which we have full knowledge of. I'm talking about the Hiroshima type weapons. I'm not going down every rabbit hole of possible nuclear technologies. But if you have a nuclear weapon that it can only be used it can only harm innocent people. Like even if you're targeting a certain person or head of state or city where there's some bad people, you cannot set off one of those bombs essentially anywhere in the world without killing innocent people. So if you have an instrument that can only kill people, you are essentially a standing threat. And I mean that you are spraying that machine gun around potentially. It's not a perfect analogy at all. But I do think there is an extent of this is purely a danger to others. There are times when I would say it's morally justified to intervene.
Could you also apply that same sort of like the amount of catastrophe on innocent lives? Like let's say you never took it out of your basement. Well, what about just the chance that something happened that caused it to detonate?
Yeah, that's my point.
That it would be such a small chance. But the damage would be so great that even such a small chance multiplied by the potential damage.
Now, I guess
I want to say that Ryan's becoming more of a libertarian because he's agreeing more with Marc, but I think Marc's becoming less of a libertarian in this argument. So I'm not really sure where this stands.
I'm banning nukes. No, it's just a thought that I've had before.
Well, I kind of like this idea of sticking with the non-aggression principle, but also applying it to
logic,
like chance of harm plus amount of harm.
It's not a percentage thing to me. It's just a more of like, are you literally putting other people in danger? It's not. I'm not looking at it as the chance you will harm somebody. I'm looking at. I guess I am in a way. Okay, so yeah, this is
chance,
good. This
potential, same thing.
This is why I like talking about this with people that haven't, that aren't in the bubble, because you guys think of stuff like this and it's cool. So like, okay, let's go back to my spraying a machine gun around in a circle, for example. To me, you're clearly taking a so maybe it is percentage of chance. I don't fucking know. But you're clearly taking a high chance that you're going to kill somebody by spraying a machine gun around. But you might not. So did you violate the NAP by just spraying around if you happen to not kill someone? Maybe if you know that you're somewhere where there is no people. If I stand on a city block and spray my machine gun around, and then you could look at the car that way. If I'm driving through a busy street with my car swerving this 2-ton weapon all over the place, then I am causing enough harm to intervene and stop me.
You're
Causing
creating enough
potential
risk.
harm.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's a more direct than John's like maybe you take meth and kill a baby thing.
Well, I think
it's also definitely going to be arbitrary, and it's so abstract because it's this sort of abstract threshold of it's now causing. There's now too much chance of too much harm. But I do like that a lot though.
The state defining these chances is the biggest problem. In a private property society where there's actually insurance companies who actually do risk calculation and businesses deciding these things, you're going to actually get rules based on actually calculated chance, not arbitrary laws made by politicians who have no fucking clue what any of these actualities and any of these chances or percentages actually are. In a society where there's actual consequences to the property owners that are responsible for the safety of the people on their property, they actually have to literally do these calculations and figure out their level of risk and what level of risk of success is acceptable. So that is again my point, that having the state even in areas like this where I can see a justification, a moral justification, I still believe that the state arbitrarily defining these things through the ideas of politicians and the whims of politicians is the worst possible way we could do it, because it mostly results in innocent people that aren't necessarily even at a threshold that I would consider dangerous being punished, and they're really just used to milk people for more and more money for the state, which is one of the many problems with this way of approaching government. People essentially all become revenue sources, and that leads to more prosecution of crimes unnecessarily. So I think we're going down many rabbit holes here. But I think ultimately the state arbitrarily deciding these things and not actual risk calculators is, it's separate from the moral issue of it.
Would you feel better if the politicians weren't just making up the numbers and were consulting with, like, let's say, actuaries at insurance companies?
No, because they're probably being paid off by that stupid company, and that's why they're crony capitalists
and biologists and human biologists.
Well, if you're going to go that far, then why not let the market figure it out too? If you're already that far that they should just listen to what the market actors say, why not let market actors?
Well, no, my question is, if they did do that, then they would be less stupid and less arbitrary. Is it just the concept of it being a government, or is it how stupid the government is?
I think by the very nature of the lack of accountability of the systems that we have, it's going to end up being more stupid, because politicians are really not punished on the damages of their policies. Right. Whereas a company is, an individual is or should be, a politician is essentially only responsible for convincing some amount of constituency to press a lever for them, which is totally different than experiencing the consequences of their actual policies.
So is it
I
your
think they're too
position
far
that
removed from the results?
Is it your position that, like, the fact that we have the system itself predisposes the system to be less optimal and stupid?
Absolutely, to an extent,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so again, we have to wrap somewhere. Mark, finish that sentence, but we actually have to end.
We're talking about half-hour-long diatribes here.
Yeah, I know.
We'll just have to do a part two with more questions.
This is probably part two right here that we're doing. But
and I get fired up sometimes because I am very passionate about this stuff. But both of you guys, I think, do raise very well thought out and valid, questions, and I do appreciate it. And that's why I like doing these shows. So that's my way of.
I would love to go on all night, and I could, but I do have another show to do tonight. So we got to get some final thoughts.
You double booked up against us, Dan?
Oh, it's anti-news.
We didn't have a lightning round.
Oh.
Bonus, do we time for
Tune
the
in
bonus?
6 months from now when we do lightning round. Jon, Ryan, any final thoughts on libertarianism? Any final things that you want to throw at Mark that he can answer within the amount of 3.5 seconds that he awarded himself at the beginning of this conversation?
3.2.
So I was thinking about this before I came on, and generally, I said I'm a fellow traveler with libertarians. I kind of feel like
I honestly like the thing, not to interrupt you, but I actually think that if you approach people the right way, almost everyone is in a way. And I think the art of what I've hoping to learn to do even better and have in many ways learned through my podcast and through having conversations with people is learning to find people where they're at and at least try to and not convince everyone to be a libertarian and change their entire philosophy, but to show them my perspective and have that hopefully by example maybe influence their beliefs. Anyway, side rant, go on. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
You
But
didn't even let him ask a question. Just his
I know.
first sentence.
I kind of take it, and Dan and I did a podcast where we kind of razzed each other about like Catholicism versus evangelical Christianity, and I kind of see it as a similar thing. I mean, there's substantive theological differences between Catholics and evangelicals, but generally, you know, we feel like we're all on the same path. Maybe Dan doesn't think so. Maybe he thinks I'm going to hell. I'm sorry. But I guess that's kind of my general thought with I think libertarianism is a net good for America. I think, you know,
for society, even you might say
for even for society,
is a philosophy practicing individual rights best for society. What a conundrum.
When I go to CPAC this weekend and see all these libertarian kids, like I'm going to be like, okay, you know, this is good. So yeah.
Until they offer you some meth and you're like, what are you trying to kill me?
He's trying to kill a baby.
Kill my baby too.
My final. I don't want to interrupt. Sorry.
I mean, that's the gist of it. Like,
kind of what we do here.
Yeah.
My final thoughts would be: I am torn between being very angry when someone says that I shouldn't be able to smoke weed legally, and like I feel indignant at the audacity of them trying to infringe on my life like that. But then at the same time, I feel torn between that feeling and the feeling of like feeling like a collective that cares about its individual members through force. Like I do feel.
You're wavering between the Federation and the Borg, and you're just not sure.
Like I feel the honest indignity or indignancy and anger toward the oppressive sort of democracy or oppressive state of other people saying I can't do this when I'm not harming anyone. Feel that anger, but I also
want to unleash it on others as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but honestly, I don't think that's. I think that's fair. I don't think that's a unique position to have. No, I should. I didn't mean fair. I meant I think that is a. I think that's like an accurate statement. But I think a lot of people would feel that way, but it's contradictory. I completely acknowledge that those things are different, are competing views, and I guess time will tell what happens with how I resolve that.
Mark, any final thoughts? Take it home.
Liberty, fuck yeah.
So to all my libertarian friends, thank you for tuning in and for discussing these things tonight. Current and future libertarians, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Former libertarians die.
I'm probably a former libertarian to some people from my
apostasy.
Right, yeah, right. I think that if anything, this whole conversation just made Mark look less libertarian and you guys look more libertarian. So there's some middle ground here, and that's the whole point of TriPartisan Triggering. So thank you guys for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed that conversation, that really lengthy conversation as much as I did. I enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking to those guys. They are all very much friends of mine. Just goes to show you that the point of this show, change the world one uncomfortable conversation at a time, is possible. It is very possible to have three people from completely different backgrounds, completely different walks of life, who have completely different political leanings and different ideas of what would make the country the best. We can put them together and have a conversation that is friendly and not shouting, not yelling, not name-calling, even talking about some, heated topics, some points of contention amongst different parties. But we're all humans. We're all figuring this shit out together. So let's continue to do so. Take what you have learned and go forth. Share it with the world. Be a decent human. Humble yourself. Also, if you would like to continue this conversation, be a part of it yourself, you can do so at the System is Down forum, which you can find by going to tsidpod.com/forum, or just go over to Facebook and type in the System is Down forum, hit enter, and there you have it. Ask to join. If you look like a real human, I'll let you in. Also, go join the Downers Club and support the show. Won't you join us? Won't you be a part of this? You know that you enjoy it. I enjoy you listening even just for free. If it's contributing anything to your life, that's all I can really ask. But if you enjoy it just enough to consider supporting, it's like $5 a month. It's like nothing. And you get bonus audio. You get bonus episodes of the show every week. And you help this movement get bigger and better, and you can become a part of it with us. You can join us as we change the world, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. We've got, what bonus episodes do we have coming out? I think we did some extended conversation here at the beginning. It was just a bunch of dudes chatting and ranting about nonsense, like it often is in the behind-the-scenes stuff. That's what you see a lot of in the Downers Club. You see some of the behind-the-scenes, what the people are like when they take the gloves off and just chat. We did a little bit of pre-show. I'm pretty sure that's going to be released as a bonus. I'll have to go back and review it. I haven't listened to it in a while, or haven't listened to it since we recorded it, but I'm pretty sure there's some good stuff there that's worth putting out. And we also, I believe we're going to have an episode of Legions of Liberty Doom coming out this week. That's where myself and some of the guys from Lines of Liberty and Remzo Martinez, we all get together and chat about some stuff that's going on in the world, some news, and, just rant about libertarian ideas and fun stuff. So if you're a libertarian, or even if you're not, if you just like to hear people make jokes and have some fun, go check that out. I guess I don't necessarily need to tell you all the things that we do, but we do Would You Rather Wednesdays sometimes with Remzo Martinez. We do movie and TV reviews and Rotten Potatoes. We do extended interviews with guests. We do anti-news after party when we do the anti-news. All sorts of things you get by joining the Downers Club. But most importantly, you will be a part of this wonderful family that is a bunch of weirdos in the Downers Club. So go over to patreon.com/The System is Down and sign up for next to nothing, $5 a month. That's it. All right. And we're on all the things. As you know, we are on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Minds, the Gab, the YouTube, the huge tube. You can hit me up on email, Dan@tsidpod.com. Just interact. This is an interactive show. You are a part of the show. If you have suggestions, if you have thoughts, join us. Share the show. Help it grow. This is a movement. This is an idea. This is changing the world. Showing that we can be humans together and exploring different avenues of thought and thought experiments and all sorts of fun things together. Getting uncomfortable, getting down and dirty and real together. So go do all those things and leave us a nice, happy review on iTunes, and that'd be fantastic, and I'll love you forever. I think that's enough. You've well earned. You've earned a show end at this point. You've stuck it out for this long, and it was a long one. I know. You're welcome, because it's free. Quit complaining. If it was too long, then you didn't make it this far, and you're not going to hear these words anyway. But if you enjoy this, stick around, because next week we've got some more great stuff coming. I believe next week I'm talking to Jamie Shoup, who's now James Shoup, the first human to legally have his gender status changed to non-binary, and now he has transitioned back into a male. It's a big cluster, but it was a great, fantastic conversation. We're going to be getting into that next week, first thing Monday morning. So if you'll have me, of course, I'll be right here nestled safely into your uncomfortable ear canals. Until then, question everything, stay uncomfortable, and I'll talk to you then. Thanks.
This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.
Hey Downers, if you like this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. But more importantly, go join the Downers Club at patreon.com/The System is Down, because the evil wizards of YouTube almost never let us monetize anything on here. Thanks.